Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, has lost the latest stage of his court battle over the level of security protection he receives in the UK. His taxpayer-funded protection was downgraded 5 years ago.
The moment this news broke, everything inside the royal corridors shifted. Harry, yes, the same Duke who walked away from the crown and built a world thousands of miles away, was quietly celebrating, according to a source who has never been wrong about him. And while his team felt victorious, almost relieved, the echoes of this development hit another couple very differently. Because just as William and Catherine were preparing for one of the most meaningful moments of their winter schedule, this new twist dragged the spotlight away from them once again. It's almost as if every time they attempt to center the narrative around duty, service, and stability, Harry's world steps in with another storm. And this time, that storm wasn't just distracting, it was personal. Very personal. Before we go deeper into the details Harry's team doesn't want you to look too closely at, tell me in the comments, whose side do you think the British public truly leans toward today, Harry or the Prince and Princess of Wales? I'll be reading every reply. And if you're someone who follows the royal world closely and doesn't want to miss these hidden developments, make sure you subscribe right now. It helps more than you know, and it keeps you in the loop before the official narrative begins spinning. Now, let's get into what really happened, because behind the headlines, behind the cheerful celebrations happening in Montecito, and behind the carefully crafted statements released by Harry's team, the reality is far more tangled and far more revealing. You see, this entire situation erupted around something Harry has been chasing for years now: security. Not emotional security, not family security, but literal state-level protection, the kind provided to working royals and extremely high-risk individuals. According to people close to him, Harry fully believes it, and not just deserves it, he believes the British public should be thrilled to pay for it. Thrilled to fund the protection of a man who does not live in the country, does not serve in the country, and does not represent the country. And that's where the clash truly begins. Because while Harry's team was celebrating the government's decision to review his security status again, William and Catherine were quietly managing reactions that the public never saw. This news landed at a moment when Catherine's highly anticipated Carol event was meant to dominate the conversation, especially after everything she's endured recently. William, deeply invested in pushing his initiatives on homelessness forward, found yet again that his work was overshadowed by a narrative from across the Atlantic, a narrative he neither created nor wanted. And that's why this celebration from Harry's camp hit so hard. The timing wasn't accidental. It never is. Someone in Harry's circle understands the rhythm of the news cycle extremely well, and they used it. But here's where things take a twist Harry didn't see coming. While his team was busy cheering, believing this review would surely tilt in his favor, insiders quietly revealed that the situation is far more delicate. The government reviewing his case does not mean the government supports his demands. In fact, the opposite might be true. Several senior officials, especially those dealing with national security and public spending, have privately expressed frustration at having to revisit this issue repeatedly. Because, to put it bluntly, Harry's risk level doesn't match his expectations. He may see himself as a global figure under constant threat, but the data doesn't back it. Not the data from the UK, not the data from the US, and certainly not the data from the so-called catastrophic car chase his spokesperson once described. That incident, by the way, still sits at the center of many discussions behind the scenes. The timeline didn't make sense, the footage didn't match the statements, and the mayor of New York himself dismissed the idea as impossible. The British Home Office hasn't forgotten that. They're still asking questions about it. Real questions. Questions Harry's team hoped would fade away. But nothing fades inside the Home Office, not when public money, risk assessment, and international coordination are involved. Which brings us to the part Harry absolutely did not want leaking. During one of his visits to the UK, Harry was captured on a doorbell security camera, not by accident, but by pure oversight. Someone from that property leaked the footage to the media, revealing his precise movements, his escort, his timing. This caused a storm inside the system, and now officials want detailed explanations. Who approved the trip? Who monitored the route? Why weren't certain protocols followed? And more importantly, why did Harry speak publicly as though the UK posed a danger to him while simultaneously moving around in ways that suggested he felt completely safe? These inconsistencies have created a major complication inside the government's review process. People assume this is simply about political preferences, but the truth is more operational. Inconsistent behavior is a red flag in security analysis. Harry's team is now scrambling, trying to justify statements that contradict his actions. Meanwhile, officials keep uncovering more contradictions, especially from events where Harry or his representatives publicly claimed danger, only for later footage or testimony to reveal no such threat existed. While all of this unfolds, something else is happening behind the scenes, and this is the part William understands far better than Harry realizes. Every time Harry returns to the UK, every time he makes headlines, every time there's a major review, it automatically positions him in contrast to William. Whether Harry intends it or not, his movements create a shadow over William's schedule. And, according to a source who's watched this dynamic unfold for years, this latest development pushed William into a mindset he hasn't shown publicly: quiet determination. Not anger, not jealousy, determination. Because while Harry may celebrate small victories, William plays a longer game. And here is the detail almost no one outside the royal circle knows. The timing of Harry's potential visits will now be monitored more closely, not by William, but by the people responsible for national events. They don't want overlapping headlines. They don't want conflicting narratives. They don't want surprises. Which means Harry's freedom to come and go may be more restricted than his team realizes, not legally, but strategically. A move designed not to punish him, but to protect the institution from chaos. As all this unfolds, Meghan remains distant, physically, emotionally, and politically. She has no desire to return to the UK, not after everything that's happened, and insiders say she has made that clear. Which means every future decision Harry makes will be weighed against her refusal to return, her priorities, and her public image, a dynamic that complicates every plan he tries to form. What most people don't realize is that every ripple inside the royal institution creates consequences that go far beyond the headlines. And in this case, what Harry sees as a personal victory is triggering a quiet chain reaction across departments he's never truly understood. Because once the security review was confirmed, a wave of questions began circulating among officials, questions that go deeper than Harry's team anticipated and touch on areas they absolutely did not want reopened. One of those areas involves the pattern of Harry's public statements over the years. Statements where he claimed danger, threats, and fears for his family while simultaneously moving through public locations with little coordination or advanced preparation. And this contradiction is now being examined with more scrutiny than ever. Every time Harry insisted, "It's unsafe for me to return," someone inside the system cross-checked it with his actual behavior, his routes, his appearances, his own team's announcements. And with each comparison, officials found more inconsistencies. These are the kinds of inconsistencies that weaken a case, not reinforce it. Meanwhile, there's a deep irony that his team refuses to acknowledge. Because while they were celebrating this review, convinced it strengthens Harry's position, the review is forcing the Home Office to reopen files they had hoped to close, files that contain uncomfortable truths, files that highlight past exaggerations, files that document exactly how the New York 2-hour chase narrative unraveled in real time. And the more these files are pulled apart, the harder it becomes for Harry's team to maintain the simple, dramatic story they want the public to believe. All of this, strangely enough, is bringing an unexpected sense of reassurance to William. Not satisfaction, not triumph, not the sense of Harry's losing, but comfort and clarity. Because William has spent years wrestling with the idea that Harry's decisions, however reckless or self-focused, could one day force the monarchy into a corner. But what the review is revealing is something William long suspected, that Harry's claims don't hold the weight Harry imagines they do, that the system isn't bending for him, that institutions, governments, and security bodies require evidence, not emotion. And that realization has shifted something inside William, a new kind of steadiness, Because for the first time in a while, the narrative is moving in a direction he can manage, a direction grounded in policy rather than drama, and that shift matters more than Harry could possibly understand. But while William finds relief in that clarity, Harry faces a different challenge, one unfolding quietly in private. Sources close to Montecito reveal a growing tension within Harry's inner circle. They can't openly celebrate because they're still waiting to see what the final review concludes. They can't allow disappointment because they've already created the image of momentum and progress. They've built expectations they now fear they can't meet. And beneath the surface, there's a quiet anxiety. What if the Home Office says no again? What if the risk level remains low? What if nothing changes? This fear grew stronger after a small but significant detail leaked from discussions within the review team: the possibility of keeping Harry's risk category exactly where it is, simple, unchanged, unmoved. And if that happens, it won't just undermine Harry's argument, it will expose the emotional foundation beneath his dramatic statements, something his advisors know could damage his public narrative. But that's not the only concern. Another layer has now been added, one Harry did not expect. Officials have questions about protocols followed during the WellChild Awards. Every year, the location is predictable, the timing is predictable, the arrivals are predictable, and yet Harry used his participation to argue he was exposed to risk. The review team wants to understand why. Why was his team publicizing his presence at an event held at the same place year after year, while arguing that threats against him are unique and unpredictable? Why claim danger while inviting attention? Why highlight risk while using the event for visibility? These contradictions are not minor. They form the core of the Home Office's evaluation. And the more they dig, the more they see patterns, not patterns of threat, but patterns of narrative building, patterns of public claims that do not match documented reality. While this analytical storm builds, another shift is occurring behind palace walls, one that slowly but surely changes the tone of the entire situation. Senior royal advisors, observing the review from a distance, have begun preparing for future scenarios. Not because they believe Harry will receive special privileges, but because they now understand how his movements and publicity cycles can disrupt key royal events. They are building strategies that ensure the institution stays protected, no matter what Harry does next. These strategies include scheduling buffers around major engagements, coordinated communication between departments, and quiet guidance given to event organizers to minimize overlap with moments Harry may use for visibility. And while these steps may seem subtle, they reflect a deeper change. The monarchy is adapting around Harry, not to accommodate him, but to neutralize the chaos he creates. A reality Harry's team probably won't recognize until it's far too late. At the same time, Meghan's distance continues to influence everything. Her refusal to return to the UK is not a small preference, it's a defining factor. It shapes Harry's decisions, his availability, his image, and even his willingness to appear at major events. And officials know this. They know Meghan will not step foot in a place where she feels unwelcome. They know she does not want to face the same press she once sued. And they know her absence complicates Harry's argument that his entire family faces equal levels of danger in Britain. This plays directly into the review, because if Meghan isn't returning, and the children aren't either, then Harry's security requirement becomes even harder to justify. It moves from protecting a family to protecting an individual who voluntarily left the institution, a distinction with enormous implications. And there's another layer forming beneath all of this, something Harry likely hasn't considered. Every time he pushes for recognition as the Duke of Sussex, every time he asserts his royal title, every time he emphasizes danger or status or entitlement, he strengthens the argument that he is trying to reclaim a position he willingly abandoned, a contradiction that officials and commentators alike are quick to highlight. Meanwhile, William continues forward with a quiet confidence, aware that Harry's world is becoming increasingly tangled in its own contradictions. He knows the public is watching, he knows the government is watching, and he knows that as long as Harry keeps relying on emotional narratives instead of consistent facts, each new review, each new headline, each new victory will eventually reveal its own cracks. Deep inside the system, where officials work far from cameras and commentary, this review has become more than a reevaluation of risk. It has become a window into the choices Harry has made over the past few years, choices that reveal far more about his current position than any headline or interview could. And as the discussions progress, one reality becomes impossible to ignore. The monarchy has changed without him. The institution has moved forward, the public has shifted, the dynamic between the heirs and the spare has evolved into something Harry never anticipated. Because in attempting to define himself outside the royal bubble, Harry created a narrative he can't no longer control. He framed himself as a global figure, a victim of threat, a man resisting an institution that held him back. But as the review digs deeper, the question that keeps resurfacing behind closed doors is simple. If the danger was truly as severe as he claims, why do his actions contradict his words? Why announce appearances in advance? Why attend events with minimal coordination? Why allow his team to publicize his movements if the threat level is as extreme as they insist? These are not political questions, they are practical ones. And every practical question chips away at the emotional framework Harry's team has relied on. Meanwhile, as officials quietly gather data, travel timelines, police reports, documented sightings, statements from his own spokespersons, they build a picture of risk that simply does not match the dramatic tone Harry presents to the world. And as this picture grows clearer, the likelihood of Harry receiving the elevated protections he desires grows smaller. Exposes weaknesses in Harry's case, it also highlights something else, something William has understood for a long time. Harry's power has never been in titles, institutions, or protocols. It has been in the public narrative, the emotional story, the idea of Harry. And now, for the first time, that narrative is losing shape, not because William or the monarchy attacked it, but because Harry's own contradictions are now working against him. This shift brings a quiet comfort to William, not out of rivalry, but out of relief. Relief that the monarchy is no longer forced into a defensive position every time Harry gives an interview or launches a new media project. Relief that public opinion is stabilizing, not in Harry's favor, but toward the institution that has served for generations. And relief that despite the chaos and conflict of the past few years, the system remains intact, unshaken, and ultimately unmoved by narratives that lack evidence to support them. Yet, while all this unfolds within government departments and royal offices, another development is quietly brewing, one that reveals how truly complicated Harry's situation has become. Senior advisors have begun preparing for the possibility that Harry may attempt to use future visits to the UK as opportunities to reset his public image, not by reconciling with the family, but by positioning himself as the misunderstood royal who bravely faces hostility abroad, a narrative that could be reignited if the security review does not go his way. To counter this, advisors are considering subtle strategies, media briefings that emphasize transparency, data-driven explanations for security decisions, and carefully timed announcements from William and Catherine's team that underscore their stability and service. These moves are not designed to attack Harry. They are designed to protect the institution from emotional narratives that lack grounding. And the more Harry pushes with emotion, the more the palace responds with fact. But what complicates matters further is Meghan's ongoing refusal to reconnect with the UK. Her distance places Harry in a position where every visit becomes a solo mission. A man returning to a country his own wife will not step foot in. A father returning without his children. A duke arriving not with the unity of a modern family, but with the weight of unresolved conflict. Officials notice this. Commentators notice this, the public notices this, and each time Harry appears alone, the contrast with William's steady family life becomes sharper. This contrast plays deeply into public perception, especially among older generations who value continuity, loyalty, and dignity in service. Harry may dominate headlines when he speaks, but William dominates trust when he works. And trust, in the long run, is far more powerful than noise. As all of these layers build upon each other, security concerns, public perception, institutional stability, the narrative reaches a point Harry never intended, a point where the review he celebrated may end up exposing the very weaknesses he hoped to hide. Because if the Home Office concludes that his risk level remains low, the message becomes unavoidable. The danger, he claims, does not align with the data. And once that conclusion becomes public, even subtly, the emotional foundation of his narrative begins to crack. And here lies the final twist in this unfolding story, one that even Harry's own advisors are beginning to quietly acknowledge. By demanding more security, Harry inadvertently forced institutions to scrutinize his actions more deeply. By insisting he is at constant risk, he pushed experts to examine his movements with greater precision. By framing himself as a victim, he invited officials to test the validity of those claims. And in doing so, he opened a door he may struggle to close again. Meanwhile, William moves forward, untouched by the drama, steady in his purpose, and comforted by something Harry cannot see from his distance: clarity. Clarity that truth is slowly overtaking spectacle. Clarity that public sympathy is shifting back toward duty rather than complaint. Clarity that stability, consistency, and service always win in the long run, even when overshadowed temporarily by noise from across the ocean. And as this clarity settles deeper into the institution, one thing becomes undeniable. Whatever path Harry chooses next, it will be shaped not by dramatic statements, not by emotional appeals, but by the consequences of the choices he has already made. And for William, that realization brings something he has not felt in years: calm. A steady calm that allows him to look ahead not with fear of Harry's next move, but with confidence that the future of the monarchy remains secure, grounded, and protected from the very chaos that once threatened to consume it. If you followed the entire story to this point, tell me in the comments whether you think this security reveal will finally bring closure or simply open another chapter in this long royal divide. And if you want more deep, behind-the-scenes royal narratives like this, make sure you subscribe right now so you never miss what unfolds next.